Tyson, Bryan.
Welcome to Nonstop Rock Talk. I am, as always, your host, Tyson Bryan. It gives me great pleasure to welcome back author Tim Durling. Welcome back to the show. How are you doing?
I'm doing really good, Tyson. It's good to be back. Thanks for having me on again.
It is my pleasure. I mean, last time, which was only, about a month ago?
Yeah, not that long ago, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, so it's still fresh in my mind, probably fresh in your mind. I mean, I thought the episode turned out really good. So when we discussed possibly having you back, I jumped at the chance. So thank you for doing it. And I mean, today we're talking about something a little bit different. It's another book, which you had actually at the end of, after we were off air, you had mentioned to me that you had another book coming, and you actually showed it to me, and which is what we are going to talk about today, which is kind of last time. I mean, most of our talk encompassed a lot of the 80s, right? And this artist, I mean, goes back to the 60s, into the 70s, into the 80s, and so forth, and they're still going. So anyways, this book is entitled The Sound That Haunts You, The Beginner's Companion to Fleetwood Mac. And now, before we discuss Fleetwood Mac in the book, I'm sure there's a backstory as why you chose Fleetwood Mac as the next book.
Yeah, there is, Tyson, and it's kind of, it's very personal, because obviously, growing up listening to radio in the 80s, watching much music, obviously I knew who Fleetwood Mac was, right? You'd have to be, living under a rock. But it wasn't in my wheelhouse. I was more of a hard rock guy, and later on I got into some more classic rock and maybe a little of prog rock. But still, this was a band that was sort of on my peripheral, but yet I was aware. So about 12 years ago, when my wife and I got together, they were one of her favorite bands, always have been. And so she had a lot of different music on her phone that she would always play, and there'd be a lot of Fleetwood Mac songs, and some songs I'd heard, some songs I hadn't. And little by little, I kind of got into it. I found myself enjoying, more and more of the songs. So I thought, maybe I'll get a few albums by this group. And I know myself, I should know better, because I don't do a few. I'm
the same.
I'm a full-on completist. And that's a challenge with Fleetwood Mac, because it's a massive catalog. And there are UK albums that didn't come out in North America and vice versa. And, and as far as the book is concerned, it really kind of started with more of an offhand comment by my mother-in-law, so if my wife's a big Fleetwood Mac fan, she says she was listening to them in the womb, because her mother loved and still loves Fleetwood Mac. So, it was just sort of like hereditary, right? And she kind of casually said to me once, Tim, are you going to, why don't you write me a Fleetwood Mac book? I had no intention of doing a book on Fleetwood Mac, because I tend to do books on artists or groups that are a little more obscure, and as far as I know, don't have books about them. So Fleetwood Mac is definitely not that. There have been books written about Rumors itself, just one album. And Mick Fleetwood did a biography, and there's countless books written about them. But it got me thinking how I would approach doing a book on such a celebrated band. And I kind of said, well, if you were getting into this group and you didn't know where to go next, how would you, like to be instructed? So I thought, okay, I'll do another book like my Sammy Hagar book, which is all me. This one is not a panel discussion book. And basically it's how to get into such a vast catalog, what to expect from each album. I mean, it runs the gamut from blues rock to sort of like, West Coast soft rock. Now we call it yacht rock, to folky type of stuff, a little bit of everything. And so many different sounds, so many different band members, completely different band identities, and it's complicated. So I thought, okay, I think there's something here that I can do. So it's basically a review of each of their studio albums. And then I cover songs that aren't on any of the albums, but are just kind of by themselves, like 2 songs on a greatest hits that didn't appear anywhere else, that sort of thing. And it's meant to be just what it says, a beginner's companion. So if somebody's interested, if somebody's got the self-titled from 75, or they've got Rumors, or they've got greatest hits, and they want to know what to do or where to go next, I hope this is something they will find helpful.
I think for me, my biggest interest is before the Stevie Nicks, Lindsey Buckingham lineup, because that seems a little bit more obscure.
Very much so. Very much so. Now, in the UK, the early stuff, what is commonly referred to as Peter Green's Fleetwood Mac,
yes,
was very popular. And not only was it very popular, it was extremely influential. So much so that it predates Led Zeppelin. You know, it was hugely influential. And, you know, a few people got it elsewhere, but mostly it was a British thing. But my first exposure, and I talk about this in the book, my first exposure to knowing that there was a Fleetwood Mac that existed before the Buckingham Nicks lineup was in 1991 when I bought Aerosmith's Pandora's Box. You know, because they were a band that was older, but they made such a comeback at the end of the 80s. A lot of people my age got into them, like with Permanent Vacation and Pump. And so the next thing to come out was a box set. It's the first box set I ever bought. I'd never been into a band that had a box set before because, you know, box sets were for Bob Dylan and, you know, old music, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
like, you know, music, older music, you know, even though like later on I would get into some older bands, but it came out, you know, it's the first box that I bought in real time as a new release. And among the many unreleased songs on there, there's a really raw live take on a song called Rattlesnake Shake, which first got my attention because both Skid Row and Motley Crue have songs with that very same title. And that's a very specific title. So I'm like, well, that's interesting. So there's a third song with that title. So I listened to it. It's this raunchy, bluesy rock thing. Sounds very much like something they would have written. Sounds very much like lyrics Steven Tyler would have written. And then I read in the liner notes that it's a Fleetwood Mac song. I'm like, what? It's a Fleetwood Mac song. This doesn't sound anything like what I know as Fleetwood Mac. And who's Peter Green? What's going on? Like I was confused. Not confused enough to do anything about it, but it was the first signal that, okay, this band's been around a lot longer than you think, and they've obviously had different members. And a few years later, I got into Led Zeppelin. And when you get into Led Zeppelin and you start reading about their early years, you inevitably start reading about Fleetwood Mac and Peter Green and a song called Oh Well, and the influence that it had on them. So, you know, I had a vague knowledge that they went back into the late 60s. Obviously, it wasn't until years later that I did anything about it and it went down the rabbit hole to search any further. And it's a huge catalog to take in. There's so much music to take in, and I've found myself really gaining an appreciation for, like you said, some of the more obscure albums, especially the albums in the Bob Welch era, which is from 1971 to 1974, albums like Bare Trees and Mystery to Me. There's some great music there that I'd never heard before. So this is a way that you know, somebody can pick this up, and if they want to go to one album in particular, they can do that. Or if they want to read it from cover to cover, they can do that. But it's a way to help someone make some sense out of what is really a complicated catalog. And there's a lot of, not disassociation, that's not the right word for it, but there's a lot of confusion because the name, depending on how old you are and where you grew up, the name can evoke very, very different things. Now, to most people I know, then when you hear Fleetwood Mac, you automatically picture Stevie Nicks, Lindsey Buckingham, Christine McVie, John McVie, Mick Fleetwood. You pictured that lineup, right? That's the lineup. That's the world-conquering Fleetwood Mac lineup. But there are several, and there's a period where there's almost a different lineup each album. And oddly enough, even though that lineup, the best-known lineup, it was full of drama and full of, as we know, full of interpersonal conflicts and whatnot, that was the most stable lineup. It's fascinating. So it's a fascinating band to talk about, and I found I really, really got into it. And I'm pleased with how it came out. I'm not one to brag myself up, but I do think it's an easy read, but I think it accomplishes the goal that I had set out for it, which is to educate and give people an indication of, look, if you're into this particular type of music, this might be an album for you. If you're not, maybe this is not where to start, that sort of thing.
That's cool. I mean, I find it funny that the band, and reading a little bit more about it, was named after the rhythm section, which is Mick Fleetwood and John McVie. That's because John McVie didn't really want to join the band, and to entice him, Peter Green kind of said, well, you know what, maybe we'll call the band Fleetwood Mac. And that's kind of an interesting point. And I remember thinking years back in the 80s and looking at when I first heard of Fleetwood Mac and looking at the band members and thinking, this must be Mick Fleetwood's band because his name's in it. And I'm like, well, there's a Mac McVie, there's two of them, but it's spelt differently, like it was kind of a confusing thing, right? Yep.
But millions of record buyers didn't care, right? They just bought the albums up. But it's, it's like Jethro Tull or Max Webster or, it's not, it doesn't, Marshall Tucker. It doesn't really refer to anyone personally. Yeah, the really funny thing, in the earliest days of Fleetwood Mac, there are some songs where John McVie is not the bass player. They had a guy named Bob Brunning, and then John McVie decided to join. And, I make a crack in the book that Fleetwood Bob just doesn't have the same ring to it. And it's, I talk about in the introduction how different it was than everything else that I listened to, and how it took me being of a certain age to really appreciate it. I'd always heard the songs on the radio and thought they were catchy pop songs, but no one I really knew owned any of their albums when I was younger. I mean,
me neither. I agree.
Because as huge as they were, I was aware that there was a band called Fleetwood Mac, but really, I don't know if I'd actually heard any of their songs until Tango in the Night came out, because by the time that album came out in 1987, I was actively listening to the radio and I was actively watching Much Music. So there's a good chance that the first songs that I heard by any of these people were solo songs by Stevie Nicks, or at a certain point, once I started diving a little bit deeper into this band. I mean, until 12 years ago, I hadn't heard Rumors in its entirety. So there was a lot for me to learn about. And, after a while, I was like, okay, I get it. I get why so many people love these songs. They're good songs. They're great songs, no matter cross genres, whatever I don't know how you would define this band. I don't think you can, because they've done just about every style of music within, a certain parameter, from where they started to what they ended up doing. And then even within the albums, there's quite a lot of variety. You had multiple lead singers. It was almost like it's an interesting premise for a band. Let's put it that way.
There's two bands that, going back in the late 60s, early 70s, that have that type of thing around them with members. And the first one is Peter Green's Fleetwood Mac with Peter Green, and then Syd Barrett and Pink Floyd, because
very different,
right? Very, exactly. And they, Pink Floyd, as it became their more prominent lineup, was what sold the most albums, kind of thing. And Fleetwood Mac's kind of in that same boat, right? Yeah.
Well, the crazy thing about it, and it's something that I love about the music industry as it used to be, is that they gave bands a chance and they signed these long contracts. And as long as they sold a certain amount of albums to make, just enough to cover the costs, they were going to get to do another album. So that self-titled album, the one that the first one with Lindsay and Stevie in 1975, is the 10th Fleetwood Mac album. How many bands get that many chances now? It doesn't happen anymore. If you don't make it right away, you're done.
You're done. And it's crazy to think, I was going to mention that there was 9 albums before
all of these back catalog albums for the record labels to try and sell to people. I'll give you a good example, and there's a picture of it in the book, and it's the kind of thing that I talk about this in my Sammy Hagar book. I call them truck stop tapes. I don't know if I talked about that. Yeah. So those are the record labels spit these out, and they would be in truck stops, they would be in drugstores, they would be at department stores, they would be in stores that didn't even have music sections, and they would be really cheap, and the graphics would look cheap, and there would be no information given. And I remember in the mid-'80s seeing this cassette that simply said Fleetwood Mac on it, and what I realized many, many years later is that is a repackaging minus a few songs. It's an abridged version of the debut album from 1968. Doesn't say that anywhere on it. It has a copyright date of 1985. Now, if someone that liked Fleetwood Mac was waiting in line and looked at that and said, "Oh, I've never seen this Fleetwood Mac album before. They must have a new album out. I'll take it home and buy it." And they put it on, and it's that's not Fleetwood Mac. Well, it is, but it's like it's like you need an explanation, right? It's so very, very different, and there's so many songs within these early albums that you would put on, and you could play them for just an average music listener and say, "Tell me who this is," and they would probably guess just about every classic band except Fleetwood Mac. And that's the fascinating thing, and yet it's Fleetwood Mac.
Yeah, that's crazy. I mean, looking at the most popular lineup with, Buckingham Nicks and the album Tusk. Which was the follow-up to Rumors. Yeah. And the cover of it's very bland. It's a very interesting cover.
Well, but this is my thing about Fleetwood Mac. For the most part, they had horrible cover art. They were not a band that.
Yeah, you're right.
Their album covers lent themselves to, like a band like Journey or a band like Kansas that I think have these beautiful album covers, or Rush. Yes, right. A lot of the prog rock bands. I mean, they're art. They're pieces of art. Some of Fleetwood Mac's album covers are absolutely horrific. Right. Mr. Wonderful, Heroes Are Hard to Find, or they're just plain odd, like Mystery to me. They're just really, really weird. And Tusk, it's very, unassuming. You've just got, it's one of the assistant engineers, either Ken Calley or Richard Dashett. It's their dog, nipping at their pant leg, as dogs do. I think it's cute, but as an artistic statement following up one of the biggest selling albums of all time.
It was bizarre, right?
Tusk is an interesting album, and it's one that I was looking forward to digging into because I'm always interested in those sort of notorious albums in a band's career. Like, for example, I didn't get into Kiss until the early 90s. I was very late getting into that band. And one of the first albums I was so curious to listen to was Music from the Elder, because everybody talks about it as if that's the album that dare not mention its name. And when I hear things like, and the band themselves don't even want to talk about it, and people sort of talked about it in hushed tones, I want to hear it all the more then. Tusk is kind of the same thing, even though it's sold better. It's like, oh, it's the weird experimental follow-up. I'm like, I want to hear what makes it so weird. And it's actually an album that I've got a lot of affection for. I've listened to it quite a few times. It's fascinating.
There's 20 songs.
There are 20 songs on that album, and basically you've got the dichotomy of Lindsey Buckingham really wanted to buck the system, wanted to push the envelope. He was very much into punk and new wave, and he wanted to incorporate that into his music, whereas the other writers in the band, Stevie and Christine, it seems like they just came up with another batch of songs like they would for any other album. So it's this weird mix of songs, but through it all, the production is very singular on it. There was a lot of experimentation of all sorts done, I'm sure, but I actually really enjoy the Tusk album, and I wish, it's one of those things you'd like to be a fly on the wall at Warner Brothers when they played it for them.
Presented it.
Particularly the title song. Now that the song Tusk has got to be one of the most bizarre songs to ever reach the top 10. And the only reason it reached the top 10 was because it was Fleetwood Mac, and it's the follow-up to Rumors. It had that momentum going for it. I think it's a really cool song, but it is out there.
Yes. And you know what? I found it bizarre that they started the album off with a Chrissy McVie song.
Very slow song over and over. Yeah, I call it unassuming in the book, because it's like, doesn't exactly bust the doors down. So, and you have, that was deliberate, obviously. They, had enough, and obviously they'd sold enough albums with Rumors and then the one before it to be able to call some shots. And that would include the way that the album was sequenced. It's not the record company surely didn't choose the order of the songs.
Yeah. Now, going back to your 8-track book, this was obviously on 8-track.
Mm-hmm.
How was it, as a double 8-track?
No, actually, it's a single 8-track. It must have been just the right length that they could fit it all, because cassettes and 8-tracks could hold more than a single record.
Right.
At a certain point, they have to move into 2. For example, the live album that they put out in 1980, that's on 2 tapes.
Right.
But Tusk is on 1. And when you hold on to it compared to, say, Rumors, you can feel it's heavier. It's got a lot more tape inside, probably twice as much tape inside it.
Like, that's cool.
It's probably, I don't know how long it is, but I mean, your average album was probably somewhere around 35, 36 minutes. This has to be over an hour.
Wow. Another interesting point, going back to the Peter Green days, and this kind of falls into our 80s hard rock roots, besides the Aerosmith thing. And the last song that Peter Green, the last recording, was Green Menalishi.
Yeah, I mean, any Judas Priest fan will know that.
Yeah.
And I would encourage any Priest fans out there, if you have not heard the original version, you should listen to it. It's a pretty darn heavy song for 1969. I mean, that wouldn't sound out of place on a Black Sabbath album from the same period. I mean, it's a spooky song. It's very atmospheric. Like, there's no blues in there.
I see why they did it. Why Judas Priest would choose to do that.
And they really didn't have to do much to it, did they?
No, and they kind of made it their own, but didn't have to do much to it. But I'm sure there's a lot of Priest fans that think it's just a Judas Priest song. Yeah, I mean, any fans that read the credits know that nobody in the band wrote it. But yeah, I mean, it was enough of a setlist staple. They did it at Live Aid. Yeah. So, and it's funny now, like, we're talking about 80s hard rock. The first time I heard The Chain is Kick-Axe. That's right.
And they do a fantastic version of it. It's the first time I heard it. It's on their 3rd album, Rock the World.
Rock the World.
And so I heard it first, and then I heard the Fleetwood Mac version, and I realized that, yes, it's heavier. The guitars are distorted. The bass is distorted. But they didn't change it. They just played it. And I think it's an amazing song. It's one song I never, ever get tired of. And it's interesting if you read the history of that, because it's like 3 songs meshed into one.
Yeah, it's an amazing song.
If you get the deluxe version of Rumors, you'll hear the bits and pieces that coalesce to become The Chain. But yeah, so that should tell you something there when you've got bands and artists that varied that were influenced in some way or another by Fleetwood Mac, which there's another part of the book that it's one of my favorite parts of doing the research for the book. I wanted to include something that was a little bit different. So I remember thinking that there were certain songs in their entire career that a lot of people did. Like, there were a lot of different cover versions of certain songs. And I thought, I wonder if I could find 100 different individual Fleetwood Mac songs by 100 different artists, and I did.
Really?
I had to rely on Discogs and YouTube a lot but there's a list of 100 different Fleetwood Mac songs covered by 100 different artists, and they really run the gamut. I mean, they are literally all over the place. You have contemporary Christian bands, you've got country artists, you've got sort of avant-garde, you've got jazz, R&B. You've got well-known artists, you've got artists that I could barely find any information on at all doing Fleetwood Mac songs and different ones. I didn't want to have when I say 100, I don't mean that includes 5 different versions of The Chain. I mean different versions of 100 different songs. And
that's crazy.
Yeah, so that was a real pleasure. And listening to some of them, there's French language covers. And one that I made, there was just no way I wasn't going to include it. Most people think of the Green Manalishi as a Judas Priest song. Most people think of Black Magic Woman as a Santana song. But guess what? It's a Fleetwood Mac song. That's a Peter Green.
I did not know that.
That is a Peter Green original. And his version did not sound that different, except, Santana added more of the Latin beat. And then they mesh it with another song called Gypsy Queen. Not Sign of the Gypsy Queen, just Gypsy Queen. But that's the part in Black Magic Woman that when it gets faster. Up until then, if you were to listen to the Fleetwood Mac version, you can tell it's the same song. And that was a huge hit, top 5 hit for Santana, and it's a Fleetwood Mac cover all the way back in 1970. So that's how, that's how far their influence goes. And the Smashing Pumpkins has covered them. Courtney Love, it's the Dixie Chicks or the Chicks. That's right. It just goes on and on. And so I had a lot of fun finding all those different cover versions.
That's amazing. That's so cool. Now, I wanted to ask you. Okay, so first, again, the book is available on. You can find it on Amazon, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Am I correct? And that's the main place to go to.
That's where my books are available. Yeah.
Yeah.
They print them and yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I've looked up a couple, and I'm gonna buy a few of them because.
Thank you. And actually, when this came out, the prices on all of my previous books went down too.
Yeah. Yeah, I noticed that. Yeah, because they were about, I think, $43. I mean, looking at the YT now. Now they're like $28. Yeah,
it's sometimes Amazon just does that, but yeah, it's fine. And you have admittedly, you don't make as much per book, but not having to worry about shipping is not have to worry.
They do everything.
Who's going to print this? Who's going to ship it? They do it all. So
yeah. It's amazing.
So for me, as someone who's doing this not as a main career, it just works.
Yeah, I think that's perfect. Now, there's a few 8-tracks that I got thinking about that I was going to ask you about if they're available. I had Steve Lynch from Autograph on my show last week. So Autograph was one of the bands that would fall from 84 to 87. Have you ever come across an Autograph 8-track?
I don't own any, but I do know that the second album, That's the Stuff, exists on 8-track. I don't know about Sign In Please, which you'd think it would because it was a bigger album, had turned up the radio, and Loud and Clear, I don't know. But I do know that That's the Stuff from 85 exists on 8-track. I think that you can, I'm going to check it right now because I'm a great fan of Discogs for confirming things. I'm just wondering if somebody has uploaded it because Discogs is a fantastic resource, but it's only as good as how it's kept up. And I can see that no one has uploaded the 8-track version, but I can guarantee you it exists. All you'd have to do is go on to 8-track Fixation on Facebook, a great Facebook group. Some people have had it, people have sold it. So yes, there is at least one Autograph 8-track. Which is crazy, right?
It is.
When you think of what the music sound like and what the band looked like on 8-track, but I know it's real.
And see, that's after our conversation, on our first interview. It intrigued me because I'm going back and I'm thinking, hey, I wonder if
most sensible people wouldn't think about it, Tyson. That's just
No,
it.
I know,
It troubles my mind. But yeah, for example, one of my grails that I'm looking for is Fleetwood Mac's Greatest Hits from 1988, the one with the green cover with the flower on it.
Yeah, I remember that one. Yeah.
And Journey's Greatest Hits both came out at the same time. They're both listed as coming out November 15th, 1988. I have the Journey's Greatest Hits on 8-track. Those two are the last 8 tracks to be released by a major label. I mean, until years later when there were, bands that put out albums on 8-track for, there have been a few, like the band Ghost put a 8-track out, Dolly Parton put a Christmas album out, but by a major label issuing them, that's when the record club, like Columbia House, finally said, no, we're done. I don't know why they lasted as long as they did. I don't have an answer to that. But yeah, I would like to have that Fleetwood Mac Greatest Hits. However, having said that, I do have Tango in the Night, which is from 1987.
Oh, you do? Okay, cool.
Now, yeah, and I realize that, that's a band you'd almost expect if they were making 8 tracks longer. That's a pretty wide audience. I happened to just get this today. I haven't listened to it yet. The new Cheap Trick album.
I know. I knew that was coming out. I had it in my cart and then I took it off, and I'm still going to get it though. I'm looking forward to that because, I think I've bought the last 3 or 4 that came out on vinyl. So I've kind of...
Yeah, I think they've been pretty good. I love the back cover. Speaking of vinyl.
Oh, that's cool, man.
All their... I don't even know. Like, some of these, I don't know if they just made up, like, a mock-up for the cover because there's, like, Rockford and Special One. I'm like, I don't think those ever came out on vinyl, but maybe they did.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, no, I love that. I mean, that is just really, really cool. Cheap Trick's a band that I like. I don't love, but I like.
I'm the same.
Yeah, I like them. I'm a fan, but they're not one of my favorites.
No.
But yeah, they had a new album out, so I got the CD and the vinyl. So
oh, cool.
Anyway, there's a Kiss connection there, but. Yeah, I just did that episode talking all about Ace's solo career, and that was interesting to do because people have different opinions on those albums. I still don't have all those albums on vinyl either, but at a certain point, you have to spend money on important things, I guess.
Well, I have all the Fraley's Comet, and before we move on, I will ask you about the 8 tracks of the Fraley's Comet. They aren't, right?
No.
No.
As far as I know, Atlantic Records wasn't putting out rock 8 tracks past a certain point. I'm going to say past 86.
Okay.
And the way that I approach that is I use examples of other bands that are in a similar genre.
Yep.
So with Atlantic Records, I'm going to talk about AC/DC. So Who Made Who, that movie soundtrack from 86 is on 8-track. That came out on 8-track.
Oh, okay.
But the Blow Up Your Video, which came out in early 88, did not. So that's kind of telling me, like, AC/DC was a bigger selling band than Ace was on his own.
Yeah.
So that kind of tells me that there was a cutoff. So there were certain labels that kept going. CBS seemed to keep going. Geffen, I'm just trying to, looking at what I do have from 87, but Atlantic is not one of those labels. They didn't seem to keep going. Like, the weird thing is, and I don't understand this, but there's only, that I know of from all of my research, there's only one In Excess 8-track, which is Shabu Shaba, their 82 album, which was their first one on Atlantic Worldwide.
Okay.
That is uber rare. I don't have it. Yeah. I'd like to have it. I do like that band, but you'd think that would be mainstream enough to have.
Yeah, you'd think Kick.
Listen Like Thieves and Kick, because those are big albums, right? But they don't seem to. And so, when you've got Ace, who, I think that first Fraley's Comet album almost went gold, but didn't. I just don't think the demand was there, because at this point, like, Mercury didn't even put, that I know of, anything out on 8-track past Animalize. So if Kiss weren't getting any 8-tracks, it's a very unlikely Ace would have been.
True. Did Bon Jovi get an 8-track?
The first album.
The first album.
I don't have it. It's one of my grails.
Okay, cool.
You can see it on. You can see the front cover of it on Discogs. Nobody's uploaded the back cover. I've seen it, but I don't own the pictures. So, but yeah, that's pretty crazy in and of itself. I remember the 8-track fixation group that I've mentioned on Facebook. That's where I learned a lot. That's where I learned that there were actually a lot more 8-tracks released than I thought.
Right.
And there were a lot more like rock bands released. And I saw a photo of that, and I remember writing in the comments, probably about 7 years ago, said, I have lived to see a Bon Jovi 8-track. And I actually, to be honest with you, I was negotiating with someone on Messenger about he wanted to sell me. He had it, and we're talking about price, and he was talking about $300, $350 US.
Okay.
And the crazy thing is, I'm thinking about it.
Right.
I'm thinking about it. I'm thinking about would you take some at a time? Because I love that album anyway. I do. I really like that first album.
I do too.
But then he said, it's only got the front cover sticker. It's missing the back. And that took me and that brought me right back down to earth. I said, well, I'm really not interested in that. I said, no, I guess not. Really? I mean, it could be legit. It could actually play, but I don't want it.
You want it fully intact.
I want it fully intact. And all it would like the front covers, the Columbia House ones, like I've shown you with the blue square around. That's what it looks like. But the back cover, I mean, I can picture it, but I don't know I don't know what they did to the song order.
Yeah,
but that really took me out of that conversation. But there again, so there's 84, and there doesn't seem to be any past that album, and yet. Yet Rush Power Windows exists. So Mercury, and so does Scorpions Worldwide Live.
It's on oh, really?
And it's on Mercury. That's on 8-track.
Wow.
Well, why isn't Asylum on 8-track? Why isn't 700 Degrees Fahrenheit on it?
What about Rat? Like Invasion of Your Privacy?
So here, this is that's a really weird one. Because the EP, the 83 EP, exists on 8-track.
It does? Wow.
Yeah. As does Invasion. But Out of the Cellar, it doesn't seem to. The biggest album.
That's crazy.
That's one of those things where I have to throw my hands up and go, as far as I know.
Right.
It doesn't make any sense to skip one and then do another one. It's like Sammy Hagar. VOA, his biggest solo album, doesn't seem to exist on 8-track, and yet I'm looking at it right now. I've got the Hagar, Sean Aronson Shreve album, Through the Fire, which came out the same year, 84.
Yeah, you have that.
I've got the 1987 album, the one that came
That's
after.
crazy.
That came after
That's
51,
so bizarre.
50. Now, so I have to think that it exists, but why haven't we seen it by now? Why haven't the collector's circles, why hasn't it turned up? I just, it doesn't make any sense to me that it wouldn't. Another one that I'm surprised doesn't, because it's just mainstream enough, is Rainbow Final Vinyl that came out in 86.
Yeah, I remember that album, yeah.
Because I've got them all the way through Bent Out of Shape. Bent Out of Shape's hard to find, but I've got them all through there. And for that matter, why didn't Deep Purple's House of Blue Light come out? Because Perfect Strangers was a big album. I've got that on 8-track.
Right.
Why didn't House of Blue Light come on? So certain labels were just curtailing they must have just been deciding, look, I mean, the label, the record clubs can do whatever they want. We're not sending them any music in this format, because every format needs its own master.
That's right.
They're all mastered differently. So bottom line is, I don't think that there's any Ace Frehley. I mean, if there was, I have to think it would be the first one, and that's it. But I'm not going to say that it is. Here's another good example. Here's another great example. Foreigner Inside Information. That's a light, mellow album for them.
Yeah.
It doesn't exist. Why doesn't that would have been a mainstream enough to put out? So Agent Provocateur is on 8-track, but Inside Information isn't, nor is Lou Graham's Ready or Not. Seems to me those would have made sense to put out. Cheap Trick's another weird one, because their last 8-track, until they put the latest out in 2009, but the last one they put on 8-track was Next Position Please. So that means that Standing on the Edge, The Doctor, and Lap of Luxury all came out within that window when they were still making 8-tracks. And the thing is, too, they were a CBS Records band.
Right.
And Columbia House was a division of CBS. You'd think it would cost next to nothing to pop those out.
Yeah.
Especially Lap of Luxury, because that had the flame on it. But,
I know, which was a huge album.
So it seems like once they stopped.
Was One on 8-track?
Oh, yeah. One on One, actually, that's the last one that came out in retail.
Okay.
Next Position, Please, I don't have. That's really hard to find. That only came out on Columbia House. Same as Heart Passion Works. I don't have that one. That's really hard to find. But I've got the self-titled and Bad Animals.
Wow. That's so cool,
yeah.
Tim. That's
and there's some
That's
bands
so cool.
that don't have any, or it seems, like Twisted Sister, for example.
Yeah.
So why do Rat have albums
Same
on
label.
8-track, but Twisted Sister don't? They're both on Atlantic. Like, why is Motley Crue Shout at the Devil on 8-track, but Theater of Pain isn't?
Yeah, it's just so bizarre.
Yeah, so there were a lot of, like, that's why I would have loved to have talked to someone that worked
right?
At one of those companies and say, look, where was who decided? Who made did the artists have anything to do with it? Because I know that there are some artists that have no idea that some of their albums existed on 8-track. He doesn't post much anymore. I've talked to him a few times. It's been quite a long time. I tried to get him in my book, but he said he was working on a book, and I've never seen anything of it, but I haven't bothered him. But I can't even think of his actual name, but his username on Instagram is 8-track guy. And his whole thing is he gets them signed. He'll seek people out and get them signed. I mean, he's got and he's got the pictures to prove it. Like, he's got
Wow.
Paul McCartney signed a Revolver 8-track for him. Elton John signed an 8-track. Like, he's gotten lots of them, but he's gotten people the name went out of my head. Who's a singer from the Thompson Twins?
I don't know who that. I wouldn't know who the name of the Thompson. I can't remember.
The guy's name is. It's bothering me because I should know it. It's right at the. Anyway, he signed one. He didn't know that there were any 8-tracks with his music. The Fix, a couple of members of the Fix, they're looking at it and like, is this real? Like, is this, did you make that? Like, they didn't know. They had no idea. Richard Marx, his first album is on 8-track. That's 87, right? Yeah. He had no idea.
No idea. Wow.
No. So it was somewhere in the record contract. It must say at that time that, this rights distribution to blah, 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 blah. Like, so
I'd love to see some of those contracts. I'm always curious about, some of those record contracts of we never get to see that stuff. And I understand why, but it would be nice to see that stuff in the fine print to see, what was the whole deal?
See, because at a certain point, there were some groups that just stopped letting their music be put out through the record clubs. Like Metallica comes to mind. Right. I've seen copies of And Justice for All that were distributed by Columbia House, but nothing after that. Yeah. Because I would imagine they make very, very little. They would make very little because the Columbia House's whole business model was it was weird. They got ripped off like crazy. I know they did. Oh, they must have. Because people would get the introductory offer, they'd get it sent to some bogus address, or they'd get it sent to general delivery. You used to be able to do that. You just go to the mail and say, "What have you got in general delivery for this name?" Make up a name, and I'd know because I'd go to there was a pawn shop in my hometown. I'd go there. There'd be all these brand new CDs for sale, and then you'd look at the back, and they all say distributed by Columbia House. Yeah, CRC or whatever. Yeah, right, they'd have the address for Columbia House on the bottom, or they'd have those extra characters on them, or the barcode would look different. So it's like they couldn't have been making any money. So how much money was the artist making? Well, that's just it. It's kind of like Spotify, right? It's the Spotify before Spotify. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, it's a really crazy it's a really crazy thing to go down. But I love that when you do talk to someone that's interested like you, it's really cool because you can say, yeah, okay, well, this exists, that doesn't seem to, but this one does. It's so amazing. It doesn't. It's just really hit and miss.
Yeah, it's
what does and what doesn't. Like Aerosmith is a good example too, because the one Aerosmith 8-track I don't have is Done with Mirrors. That exists as an RCA Music Service one, because they'd switched to Geffen, and that just never comes up for sale. And so that's the last one. But you'd think that being Columbia, when they put out that Classics Live,
right,
Classics
1 and 2,
Live 2, and Gems,
yeah,
those would be easy to pop out and maybe get somebody to put them to fill out their order. You'd think they would. So that's those the CBS ones really surprised me. It's like, because that's the label. That's the. Yeah, it doesn't make any sense to me, but it's at the same time, it is fascinating. There's one I'm just looking at mine now. There's one 8-track, and this has nothing to do with Columbia House or anything, but there's one album by a fairly big artist. It's not a big album, but it's a fairly big artist that I have seen zero evidence of it existing on 8-track, and that's the first Bryan Adams album.
Oh, the one with the purple. Is that the one with the purple cover?
It's got
with him?
Remember and Hiding from Love. And I mean, it was on A&M. And in 1980, it was still just understood that you put an album out and then they'd put it out on
8-track.
Vinyl, cassette, 8-track, I know it wasn't a big selling album, but it's not even like you're looking for record club editions. It should be just retail ones kicking around, especially in Canada. Never seen them. Never seen any evidence of it.
That's
but that
crazy.
really doesn't make sense, because that's well within the parameters of retail 8-tracks. So that one I don't get. Now I do have. I've got his next 4 albums on 8-track, including Into the Fire.
Really? That's cool.
All Columbia House was. Now that would be it. There's no possible way waking up the neighbors.
Yeah.
But so with some artists, you can say with some certainty, look, there's just no way. But at the same time, it's like then you think of, like, if I've got I've got Sammy Hagar's I Never Said Goodbye, or a self-titled, the 87 album on Geffen. Does Appetite for Destruction exist?
Well, that makes you wonder. Right, Permanent Vacation. That's all 1987, right? Hysteria, which isn't Geffen, but I mean,
but Hysteria is in my book as a what if. But like I said, Mercury just didn't seem to be putting them out, and Geffen wasn't putting them out, and yet they put the Hagar one out. I don't know.
That's so weird.
Unless it's because Hagar's contract was a little bit older. I don't know.
Yeah, it's Contagious on. No.
Y&T's a weird one.
And I think we did touch on that last time, but
I've got the first 2. I've got the Yesterday and Today albums on London. But again, Earthshaker came out in 81. Black Tiger came out in 82. There are plenty of A&M 8-tracks that came out retail in those years. There's 38 Special, there's Styx, there's Joe Jackson.
Right.
So I can't say they don't exist, but I've never seen any evidence of them. So certainly, if they didn't even put those albums out, then there's no way that anything past that would have. Mind you, with Contagious being on Geffen, if Geffen were still doing it on a regular basis, maybe, I don't know. But I mean, why isn't Slippery When Wet, as big an album as that was?
Right.
By the beginning of 87, it was a foregone conclusion that was going to be a blockbuster album. Why isn't that on 8-track? And yet Europe's Final Countdown is.
I mean, it would be cool if Slippery When Wet with the other cover on 8-track would be,
I mean, that's very possible, because they might have said, well, send us a cover art and we'll do a, we'll do a mock-up of it. And that's another thing, that if just because an album was offered, say in the catalogs,
right,
as available on 8-track, if no one ordered it, did they make any?
Right.
I don't know. So again, I really wish I could have talked.
Now, did they press stuff when, do you think they kept it in the warehouse, or they pressed it when people wanted it, is what I wondered. Like like Amazon does with your books, right?
I don't know. They may have had the master tape and just say, we're going to run off 50 of these, or I don't know.
Yeah.
The closest that I came to finding someone like that was a friend of mine. What's his name? Oh, I hate that. His username is Zartan69. His Oh my goodness. I hate getting old, man. His names are escaping me tonight. But
okay.
He's I think he's definitely of Hispanic descent. So a friend of his who is also of Hispanic descent, his mother worked at Columbia House in the 80s. Doesn't speak any English,
right, and
her health wasn't good. So he tried to say, look, would you be able to, if he gave you some questions, would you be able to ask her some questions? But it didn't happen. So that was the close. But she might have just worked in a warehouse. I don't know. She might have had nothing to do with the decision making. She may have just been someone that, here come the bottoms of the tapes, here come the tops. Someone had to go put them together.
Yeah.
And, I don't know. I don't know how that would have worked. But that was the closest I came to actually finding someone, because I've asked online and nobody, it's one of those things you ask in the internet.
There's got to be somebody so.
Well, it couldn't have been a small. No, they must have had a pressing plant somewhere.
So here's what I'm going to tell you, and I know there was a pressing plant in Scarborough.
Yeah,
because when I had one of my first jobs, one of my first time full-time jobs. I used to work for an electrical company, and I did deliveries around the city. And, we had a motor shop, so I'd have to pick up motors. I was at Columbia House. I would go there on occasion. So I've actually been in the factory. And and Sinram as well, which used to be one of the...
Yes. I know. Manufactured by Sinram. I've seen that on many a CD.
So I was always excited when I got called. I had to go there because I'm like... I want to see the inside of this place. Sinram security was unbelievable. And Columbia House, I believe it was too, but not like Sinram. Sinram security was unreal because it comes down to copywriting and, it's...
Well, yeah, you'd get copies of, they'd have access to things that haven't been released yet.
That's right. So that was really cool. So I have been in the Columbia House warehouse.
So what time period are we talking?
We are talking 94, 95 maybe. So there'd be no 8 tracks at that time, but 94, 95.
Right. That's cool. That's really cool. So it's funny because Columbia House Canada, they were the same company, but it was a different numbering system, and it was
that's what you said, yeah.
Obviously, like Columbia House in the States, they weren't going to have Gowan or Platinum Blonde or Kid Mitchell or you know what I mean? There were certain artists that were kind of limited to Canada. And also, like I said, Columbia seemed to stop making 8 tracks in 84.
That's crazy. So
those
Def Leppard, in terms of their catalog, is On Through the Night and High and Dry on 8 track. Do you know?
So On Through the Night, I have, there's some of my prized possessions. My On Through the Night's a retail one.
Wow.
And High and Dry is on retail as well. The version I have is a Columbia House copy. Actually, here's the crazy thing about Def Leppard. Technically, none of their albums, of the 3 albums, the first 3, none of those are Record Club only. Pyromania was one of the very last retail 8 tracks put out by a major label. So that came out in January 83. Of 1983. So What I'm thinking is my understanding, being a Def Leppard fan for so long, that album was, I think, supposed to come out in October of 82. It was delayed, right?
Right.
Mont Lang. It was pushed back. So they probably already had it done.
Okay.
So my copy of Pyromania is a Columbia House copy from the U.S., but there is one of those beige Mercury U.S. 8 tracks for Pyromania out there. Now, I say that, yet there is still one Def Leppard 8 track I'm looking for. That's a Record Club only. This throws everybody. Nobody gets this. It's like brain teaser, but you will once I explain it. It's an album that came out in 1981, but was reissued in 1984.
Well, I know they reissued High and Dry.
Yeah.
Right.
That reissue of High and Dry that has Me and My Wine and Bringing On the Heartbreak remix came out on 8 track. It didn't come out in the stores. So I don't have that. I've got the 81,
The 81,
high and dry.
yeah, the
But the
original.
84 one exists on 8-track, and of course I want it.
I was going to ask about that, which version it was. So
Yeah.
that's cool because they had re-released "Bringing on the Heartbreak" when Def
Yeah,
Leppard
they put
broke,
it out.
right?
They put out a video for it. That's actually the only time it charted in North America.
Yeah.
And Me and My Wine was a B-side of one of the high and dry singles. And they included that on the reissue,
Which was cool.
So, yeah, so I've got the original 81 Columbia House version of High and Dry, but it doesn't have the remix and it doesn't have Me and My Wine. Yet that version is floating out there on 8-track.
Wow, that's so cool.
So the weird thing about Pyromania is that it's actually harder to find the retail version of it than it is to find the record club version of it, because it is, based on all the research I've done and people that I've talked to, there's probably about 6 albums that came out on 8-track in 1983.
6.
And that's it. Like,
Yeah.
retail.
Was like Thriller
Because
on
I don't-
8-track?
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. But yeah, Thriller came out like October, I think, of 82. Yeah, there are retail versions of that. Canadian and US I've seen. Yeah.
That's amazing.
And yet,
man.
and yet, Bad is also on 8-track, but it's Columbia House.
No way. Wow.
And even that one that, if you remember, around 84, Motown put out that album it was called Farewell My Summer Love. It was like unreleased Michael Jackson songs.
Okay. I don't know.
They were
if
trying
I
to
recall.
market it as a new album.
Yeah,
That's
okay.
on 8. That's on 8-track.
No way. Well, okay. So
Yeah.
here's.
So is the Jacksons. Is it Victory? The one that
Victory?
has Torture on it.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's on 8-track.
Wow. Now,
Yeah.
did they ever release Yngwie Malmsteen on 8-track?
I don't think so. I don't know. I don't think Yngwie is on 8-track. There are some artists that are on 8-track. It's like Dio, because Warner Brothers was releasing 8-tracks. I mean, you can get. I mean, if you find it, Black Sabbath Born Again,
On 8-track.
which came out on Warner Brothers on 8-track.
Right.
But I've never seen The Last in Line or Holy Diver.
Holy Diver.
So the only Dio 8-tracks would be Rainbow
Right.
and Black Sabbath.
Black
and,
Sabbath.
well, probably maybe Elf. Those would be pretty scarce, but they would have come out.
Yeah. Elf on 8-track.
Yeah. I mean, okay, so Ozzy, his first two,
That makes sense.
maybe even
Bark
Speak
at
of
the
the Devil would have come out on retail 8-track. Bark at the Moon seems to be the last one on 8-track, and that's only Columbia House.
That's crazy. So now getting to Ace, going back to Ace,
Yep.
you do have the Ace Kiss solo album on 8-track.
Oh yeah. The Kiss solo albums are easy to find.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there any of the 70s Kiss stuff that's harder to find on 8-track?
The originals. You know, the repackaging
they did
of the
that
first
on
3
8-track.
albums. Yep. Yeah, that's on 2 8-track tapes.
Cool.
Yeah. But that's not the easiest thing to find. And then any of those times that you have those 2 tape sets, it's hard to find both at the same time because they'll get broken up. You
Right.
know? So
I mean, even
I've got all. So what? Go ahead.
even originals on vinyl, finding the 3 albums
Yeah.
in good shape.
Yeah,
like,
I've bought like 3 different versions of that and just kind of pieced them together. I still don't have the original sleeves. You know, the ones that look like the front and back covers to each of them.
Right.
But I've got a version that's got the booklet, and I'm happy
Really?
with it.
That's cool.
You know, yeah. And the other thing I'd like to have is I think they're silly looking, but I need to get Gene and Ace's solo albums with the posters. I've got Peter and Paul's.
yeah.
You know. But yeah, as far as 8-tracks go, I've got the Kiss ones from the debut all the way through Music from the Elder, and then I've got Animalize. So I need Creatures of the Night and Lick It Up to have all of them.
That's crazy. That would be
And if you're determined to go down the solo album route, I think the only other thing would be Peter Criss Out of Control,
out of control.
because that's 1980.
Yeah, and then that would make sense,
so-
right?
Yeah, and none of the Vinnie Vincent stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that would be really it, unless you wanted to go back to, I don't know, like Bruce Kulick played on like the 2 Blackjack albums with Michael Bolton,
yeah,
or
right.
Billy Squire, Tale of the Tape, you know, pre-Kiss stuff. And Vinnie Vincent was in that band Treasure.
Treasure, yeah.
That had an album on Epic
And Warrior.
And so,
but I think Warrior.
I don't think the Warrior stuff was ever officially.
I don't think so. I don't think it saw the light until recently.
And that makes me think of Yngwie because of the
Steeler?
Alcatraz
yeah.
thing, because those guys played with,
like, that's Jimmy.
They were some of those guys were going to be in Warrior because they were in that band New England.
Yeah. Jimmy Waldo and Hirsch Gardner.
Hirsch Gardner, yeah. I've heard the Warrior demos. They're way, way, way better than anything on those Invasion albums. I can't stand.
Yeah, because they did Boys Are Gonna Rock. And it was.
I can't stand that Invasion stuff. It's too much.
It's over the top. I mean, the second one was better because he had to back it off a little bit. And Mark Slaughter but I don't like Mark Slaughter's voice on Vinnie Vincent compared to when he did Slaughter.
It was more song oriented when Slaughter.
That's right.
With Slaughter, yeah. That's a whole other thing. But yeah, I'm trying to think. I don't think there's anything else that would exist that. There probably is. I mean, if you were really like Sean Delaney put an album out in the late 70s. Yeah. I think it's more of a singer-songwriter album, to be honest with you, what I know about it. But I think it's on Casablanca. But yeah, it's aggravating, but it's fun at the same time. So when you do find something, it's like cool,
Yeah, which is awesome. I mean, it's funny. Speaking of Ace, I was on YouTube. And I was looking up Ace demos. I mean, there's a whole bunch of demos of the Ace did between leaving Kiss and the first Fraley's Comet album.
Yeah.
And I did not realize that one of those demos actually ended up on 10,000 Volts.
Yeah, Back of My Arms Again, I think.
Yeah.
Or Back into My... Yeah. Yeah, it's weird. Like, he did a bunch of demos, like 84, 85. The funny thing is, somebody said he actually did Back on the Streets, which is pretty crazy.
I've heard him do that.
Yeah.
And it was cool.
Yeah. Now, the first time I ever heard that was on John Norm's album.
Yeah, which John Norm did a great job on. That's on Total Control.
Yeah. I thought that's the first time I ever heard that song. And then it's so funny because right around that time, this is funny, I remember this stuff because it was a friend of mine that... At this time, I used to order stuff. This would have been 1991. I used to order stuff from a couple of places in the States that would list in Circus and Hit Parader that they'd have like out of print albums or they'd have import CDs and just hard to find albums.
I remember that. Yeah.
One place was called Metal Disc. I think they were out of somewhere in California. And then there was another place, I want to say, that was in Illinois. I can't remember what that one was called, but I ordered a lot from both of those places. But I remember there was a friend of mine, he's a huge Slaughter fan, and he said he can't find those two Vinnie Vincent Invasion albums. I said, well, I can order them from you. And he ended up trading me Super Mario Brothers 2 on the NES because I didn't have that game.
Yeah.
So I ordered him the two Vinnie Vincent albums, and he was we're still buddies to this day, which is pretty cool. So, but I remember it was right around that same time that I'd gotten that John Norum album because I'm a big Europe fan, and looking at the credits and seeing V. Vincent, I'm like, well, that's got to be Vinnie Vincent. How many V. Vincents would there be? And then I saw that there was a song on the first Invasion album called Back on the Streets. I'm like, that's got to be the same song. Yeah. So yeah, it was just funny, just fun memories there.
Yeah,
pre-internet days.
I always love that. It's like Hide Your Heart.
Yeah, Bonnie Tyler, Robin Beck, Molly Hatchet, Kiss, and Ace at the same time.
And Gene begged Ace not to put it out. Apparently,
and none of those acts had hit with it.
No, I know. Which I mean, the only two I've ever heard, I've never heard the Molly Hatchet version or the Bonnie Tyler version, but I've only heard Ace and Paul singing it. Well, Kiss, but. I'm not sure which one I like better, to be honest with you. I think it's a solid song, and I still listen to it.
I mean, I love Paul's vocal in it, but Ace does a decent job. It's just when you put anybody up next to Paul Stanley in his prime, and it's hard to come off.
I mean, they did it in Vegas on the weekend. They did Hide Your Heart, which I was like, wow, man, that's so cool. I'm glad that they still are doing that.
I love that they brought Bruce up.
Me too.
That was really cool. And I don't understand why there was a question mark earlier, like whether Eric Singer was going to be there. I don't understand
I don't get that.
That's got to be some contractual stuff.
Yeah, maybe. Gene did World Without Heroes. I don't know if you caught that. And
I saw clips, yeah.
And I didn't think it sounded very good.
You got to do that. You got to have the proper. That was really good when they did it unplugged.
Yes, it was cool. That's right.
But that's not really a outdoor gig type of.
No,
you know
it's
what I mean. Like they should have
not.
done. If they were going to do something like that, they should have done like Mr. Blackwell or something like that.
Yeah,
So
that would be cool. Yeah,
I actually like The Elder. I'm one of those weirdos that like The Elder.
I don't hate The Elder. I think there's some good material on it. I don't know if I love it all, but I don't listen to it enough.
I think that one of the reasons that I like it is because I came into Kiss quite late. I didn't get into them until 93. So that's, that's quite late. Certainly I was aware of them, but I always say I wasn't hearing the right songs.
Yeah.
I wasn't hearing the right songs by them. And then my buddy Matt got a Live 3, and he played that all the time. Like he just got a CD player, and a Live 3 had a bunch of songs that I always liked by Kiss all in one place. It had I Love It Loud, it had Detroit Rock City, it had Forever, had Domino. So I was like, well, maybe I should check this band. And I always knew that they had this album called The Elder or something that they never liked to talk about and nobody liked to talk about it. Well, when I hear that, I want to know more.
You want to know
Why?
more. Yeah.
Why?
It's one of those things, right?
Yeah.
Those elusive rock and roll
bands. A lot of bands, most bands at some point in their career, they've got this album that for some reason is an outlier. If you think about it, Aerosmith's got Rockin' a Hard Place. Yeah. A lot of people slag that album off because Joe and Brad aren't on it, but it's a good album. It's a good, solid album.
There's some good songs on that album. Some really good songs.
There's a lot of bands that have those one-off albums, but I remember digging into that album and trying to write out what I thought the lyrics were and just getting into the whole thing. And I was like, they were so gutsy for doing this. So I always say that I like the album, but I say that's from someone that was getting into Kiss with a whole bunch of albums to listen to all at once. Yeah. If I'd been a fan that was waiting for a new album and The Elder is what came out, I don't know if I would have liked it.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean,
so I was like, it all depends. Timeline is everything.
The Elder's interesting because of this whole, these, what was it, 5-6 years ago, this video surfaced that was never released. The movie, there's still talk of, did this movie ever get off the ground? Does it
I think it was quashed because there was a guy in England that wanted to do a movie. I'll tell you a really cool, because I like The Elder. You know who I mean by Joey Casada?
I don't know if I do.
So he's a drummer, and have you seen those performances of like Todd Kearns and all those guys doing the Kiss songs?
Yep, which I love.
Joey's the drummer.
Oh, okay.
That's Joey.
Okay.
So I've talked to Joey. He's actually got a new book out now about the drummers in Kiss. It's all about Peter, Eric, and Eric.
That's awesome. Okay.
But last year, or maybe it was earlier this year, he put out a book called The Order of the Rose, and it's a fantasy book that he wrote, but it's based on The Elder.
The Elder, yeah.
And it's fun. It's a fun read. It's like,
cool.
It reads kind of like a young adult kind of,
I had no
Harry
idea.
Potter, Lord of the Rings type of thing. But being way into the album, he makes all these little references that you don't need to know about to get the story. But if you know a lot about Kiss and some of the names he uses, it's a lot of fun.
That's cool. I had no idea.
Yeah, It's a perfect companion to it's like, The Elder is now, if there was a movie made about this book, then The Elder could be the soundtrack at long last.
I mean, I think about Unmasked too, and when I first saw the album cover as a kid, going to Sam the Record Man and rifling through and going, what Kiss album is this? Because I probably had never seen it before, and I just thought it was cool that, like, Unmasked, and then there's a picture of Gene with a handkerchief on his face, and it was that elusiveness of trying to see what they looked like.
It's funny, when I first got in, so like I said, I got into Kiss in 93. The first thing I bought from them, I bought Destroyer. I got the Destroyer CD. But the store that I shopped at a lot, Unmasked was like always there for $9.99. It was always marked down.
Yeah.
No other Kiss albums were. I don't know why it was that one. And I was confused because I knew enough about Kiss to know that Lick It Up was their first non-makeup album.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, well, so I picked it up and I like, well, when did this even come out? I looked at my 1980. Okay. And I look at the track listing. I'm like, oh, this has Shandy on it. Cause I remember seeing Shandy years ago on the Power Hour on Much Music. And I remember being surprised because my first thought was, I thought these guys were supposed to be heavy.
Right.
I had no.
That song is not heavy at all.
Yeah. Now I think it's a great pop song.
I agree.
And I think Unmasked has a lot of great power pop type of songs.
I like that album.
I love Dynasty and Unmasked. Dynasty is one of my all-time favorite albums. Dynasty. But Unmasked is even more pop. But I like it. I've grown to like it more over the years. But yeah, that was an album where it was like until I looked at the back, I didn't know where it fell in their catalog because I knew it wasn't a truly Unmasked album. I just there was a lot about the band I didn't know. The period in Kiss I've always been the most fascinated by is between 1980 and 1983 because there's still a lot of holes that haven't been filled in about what happened exactly when. When exactly did Ace leave? When exactly did Peter leave? Like when so much happened in those 4 years. Oh,
absolutely it did.
And yet they still managed an album a year. It was pretty crazy. That's why I was really happy when the Kissology 2 came out because that covered a lot of that time period. But plus, Creatures. I like The Elder. Creatures of the Night is one of my favorite Kiss albums. So,
me too.
Yeah, I just like a lot of the music during that period. So,
Creatures is an interesting one because of like who played on what.
Who actually played? Yeah. Steve Ferris.
Who was the guy from Mr. Mister? Is that Steve Ferris?
That's Steve Ferris.
Steve Ferris.
Who was the studio guy at the time? Robin Ford, the blues player, plays I think Rock and Roll Hell. I think Vinny plays on a couple of probably his songs like Danger and I Still Love You and
Eric plays bass on I Still Love You.
Yeah, that's right. And what is his name? Adam Mitchell,
right.
Who co-wrote a lot of the songs, but Creatures of the Night, he plays some guitar on that song.
Oh, yeah, that's interesting.
So, it's a real hodgepodge of...
Did you see that Bryan Adams released 2 of those songs off of Creatures?
I've got the singles.
Yeah.
I've got the single that he put out. It's so funny because I remember way back in the 90s, I remember thinking, how cool would it be if he put out his own versions of these songs? And I said, when I posted it, I still think it's cool. It was worth waiting for.
Yeah.
Because I love the fact that one of Kiss's heaviest songs was co-written for Bryan Adams.
I know, which I love.
Two of them.
That's right.
It's like, take that. This guy can write any style of music he puts his mind to. But my only disappointment, when he put his last album out, I really wish they'd have stuck those on the end.
Yes,
on
that
CD.
Would be cool. I'd like to hear him do the Black and Blue song that he wrote, which was, I think, Miss Mystery. Jim Valance and Bryan Adams.
It wasn't Bryan Adams. It was Jim Valance.
It wasn't Bryan Adams. Didn't write that with Jim Valance. Just Jim Valance.
No. Yeah. Let me double check that. But I am pretty sure that Bryan Adams didn't have anything to do with that one.
Yeah, it could have just been Jim Valance. You might be right.
Let me see. What was that?
That was on Without Love.
Yeah. There it is. So that was written by Jamie St. James, Tommy Thayer, and Jim Valance.
Okay, and what about Without Love? The track Without Love?
That was Jamie St. James and Valance.
Okay.
Yeah.
I stand corrected. For some reason, I thought he had written.
Well, it's true. When you hear Valance, you see Adams next to it.
Adams,
usually.
Yeah.
But see, after Into the Fire, they didn't write together for many years. Then he started collaborating. That's Aerosmith and, you name it, right? Yeah. I don't know if it's still... His website used to be a really good resource for all of the songs he was involved in. Like Alice Cooper and yeah, I don't know if that still exists or not, because for a year, I used to look at that once in a while.
Yeah, because he became one of those writers with Aerosmith and
he became like Desmond Child.
Like Desmond Child, right? He was...
So if you go to jimvalance.com...
Mm-hmm.
and then click on music, and then it'll say click on song pages. It'll take you through all of these different songs and his thoughts about them, his memories of writing them.
Oh, I'm gonna have to check that out. That's very cool.
It's a really interesting read. But yeah, no, you're right. There are a lot of Adams Valence songs that other people.
Yeah, like
recorded. Crocus, Loverboy, 38 Special.
That's right,
Roger
38 Teacher. That's right. Yeah. And I mean, Bryan included those on the extended rec list.
Oh,
right.
Yeah, I've recommended that to so many people, and I said, it says so much about the writing streak that those guys were on.
Oh, it totally does.
Of the 7, I think there were 7 extra songs on there, and I think almost all of those songs went on to be recorded by other artists, and some of them became hits, like Teacher, and so it was like other people knew these were great songs. It's like, but how good does your songwriting have to be when you can give away hit singles to other people?
And you're giving stuff to Kiss, which is, Well,
see, Kiss he hadn't broken yet, right? So
That's right. He wouldn't have broken that.
He hadn't quite broken yet. But the really cool thing is on the Cuts Like a Knife album, there's Don't Leave Me Lonely, which is Adams Valence Carr.
I didn't know
Carr
that.
co-wrote. Yeah.
I'll have to look at my album.
Version of that. There's an instrumental version of that on the deluxe edition of Creatures of the Night, but it doesn't have lyrics. But yeah, Eric Carr co-wrote that. So I thought that was really cool.
I have one of the extended versions of Creatures. I don't have the box set. I've got the extended.
No, I've got the 2-disc version. I can't spring for all of those. There's so many.
Yeah,
I
didn't buy the box set because it was super expensive.
But yeah, it's got an instrumental version of Don't Leave Me Lonely on it, and which is interesting. Makes me wonder when that song was actually written. But I remember I'd had the Cuts Like a Knife album for years, but when I found it on CD and I'm looking at the lyrics, and I saw not in the songwriting credits at first, but I saw Kiss Corporation real quick. And I'm like, wait, what? So I look Adams Valence Carr. I'm like, oh, that is so cool.
Wow.
I didn't know that, because that's not a name you see outside of Kiss very much.
Yeah. I mean, there was so much of that going on, right?
Yeah.
Like especially, like Bon Jovi had to get Desmond Child to go to that next level, right? To have those hits. And Aerosmith as their comeback, and Alice Cooper with Trash, writing with the same.
Yeah, there were so many of them, like, there was Desmond Child, Holly Knight.
I read her book.
Diane Warren.
Yeah.
And generally, it's like, especially like Desmond Child, Jim Valence, so people talk about, the song doctors. I'm like, I can't criticize that, because many of my favorite songs have those guys on. The Mutt Lange,
right?
Even Mutt Lange outside of Loverboy, loving every minute of it.
That's right.
And then knowing that you listen to it and you're like, of course it is.
I know. I didn't know that for years.
Totally be a Def Leppard song.
I didn't know that until I bought it on vinyl a few years ago. Yeah. And saw Mutt Lange. I was like, you're right. I said the same thing. That makes sense. Yeah. And
I love the fact that when Loverboy they took Bryan Adams' Reckless and turned it into Dangerous, and I think it actually sings better having a 3-syllable word. It's the same song, and that's not the first time they covered, because Jump on Get Lucky is a great song that's an Adams and Valence song. So yeah, but that whole Vancouver thing, and then you go back to Prism, and
that's right. I know it's a whole revolving thing.
The whole Vancouver thing, right? And then there's Heart, and then Jim Valence factors into their career, as does Mutt Lange. There's just so much. Of course, I'm always, because I work in radio for so long, but I used to be so, I have this thing about songs. I've always been fascinated by the whole CanCon, Canadian content ruling, and where you can have songs by non-Canadian artists that qualify as CanCon. If there's enough. So if a song is recorded that's solely Canadian writers, it doesn't matter who it is or where it was recorded. You've got half
Canadian
content.
Enough to qualify. And remember on the CDs, it used to have the little circle, right?
Yep.
That would tell you.
MAPL, music, artists, production, lyrics.
Yeah.
The funny thing is like I see things that don't add up sometimes. Because technically, like any radio station in Canada will play Lovin' Every Minute of it, and they'll call it Canadian content. It's really not.
Right.
And the reason it's not is because, yes, that album was produced in Vancouver, but it was produced by Tom Allen, who's British. So there's really not enough Canadian. It's just the artist. But And yet, but then there's other weird things where I'm a big fan of Aldo Nova, like a
He's awesome.
huge fan of him. Yeah. So his second album, if you get the old Canadian cassette of his second album, Subject, it will say all selections and it'll have the MAPL that will all be filled in except for the P. And yet he produced that album himself.
That's weird.
But he produced it in New York. So it's got to have something to do with the location as well. And yet Aerosmith, Deuces Are Wild, qualifies as Canadian content because Steven Tyler and Jim Vallance wrote it, just those two. So Vallance is half the music, half the lyrics, and it was produced in Vancouver by Bruce Fairbairn, a Canadian.
Wow.
So yes, that's why, like, some people that listen to, Canadian rock radio will think of all the Aerosmith songs. Why do I hear Deuces Are Wild so much? Because it qualifies as Canadian content.
Is there anything Bon Jovi that qualifies as Canadian content?
No,
Nothing.
It doesn't. Because, see, they never really wrote with Jim Vallance, right? Right. His production would be solid, but there wouldn't be any.
It.
Actually, you know what? There's one song in Bon Jovi's recorded that would be, and it's live. It's on the, what's it called? The 2000, the one they did after Crush, the live album, 2001. I think it's called One Wild Night.
One Wild Night.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
They cover Neil Young, Rockin' in the Free World.
That's right. Yes.
That would get played. That you could play that and call it CanCon. So anytime somebody does a Neil Young song, doesn't matter where they're from, like to this day, any classic rock radio station will play Nazareth This Flight Tonight.
Because of Joni Mitchell.
It's a Joni Mitchell. Yeah. And they're from Scotland.
Yeah.
So that's your CanCon. So yeah, I mean, anybody that covers a song that's solely written by a Canadian, if anybody covered a Rush song or
Triumph.
Or Triumph, yeah. As long as it wasn't like, Just One Night or
But wait a second.
or something like that.
Wait a second. Thinking of Bon Jovi, Phil X. Does he write?
Okay, so I'll be honest with you. I don't pay much of any attention to latter day Bon Jovi.
I don't either. I'm the same with you.
I don't think he gets in many, but the only way that it would is if, let's say that they did an album again with Bob Rock in Canada.
That's right.
And Phil X co-wrote a song, but which it would only have to be one other writer, and that's
right.
it.
Yeah.
Then you'd be on to something.
Yeah.
Yeah. Then you'd be on to something. See, Def Leppard wouldn't have any.
No.
Van Halen wouldn't have any. There's some weird ones like Queensryche. I don't know if you're a fan of that band.
I am. Yeah.
On their Rage for Order album, they do Going to Get Close to You.
Yes, which is Lisa Del Bello.
Lisa Del Bello. So that's CanCon.
That's CanCon. That's right.
Yeah.
And it wouldn't matter. I mean, they did Operation Mindcrime in Quebec, but it doesn't apply because it's only the production, right?
It wouldn't even be because Peter Collins is not Canadian, right? Because you remember in the early 90s, that whole thing where they weren't considering Bryan Adams, the Waking Up the Neighbors stuff Canadian because Bryan was living in London.
Wow, I didn't know that.
He was pissed. He was mad.
No doubt.
I remember even like Sebastian Bach saying, "Since when is Bryan Adams not Canadian?" Like,
yeah, no kidding.
I think they overturned it, but man, he's had a lot to say about. He thinks it's an outmoded system, and he's actually gone as far as to say it. He thinks it promotes mediocrity.
I think he's right in some ways.
So, yeah,
he's right.
But yeah, it's pretty fascinating. You could play an entire hour of non-Canadian artists, and your CanCon for the end of the day would be through the roof.
Yeah.
Pat Benatar, Hit Me With Your Best Shot. That's Eddie Schwartz.
Wow.
Paul
I didn't know.
Don't Shed a Tear. Eddie Schwartz.
Wow.
What else did he write? Yeah, he's written a bunch of songs. Well, he wrote, they're Canadian anyway, but I love he Does a Fool Ever Learn that Helix did. That's an Eddie Schwartz song. And actually, there's a version of, I've never heard it, but Johnny Van Zant, before he joined Lynyrd Skynyrd, he had his own band just called Van Zant.
Right.
And they do a version, I think it was an 85 album. They did a version of Does a Fool Ever Learn. I've never heard it, but that would be CanCon.
Well, you know what's an interesting one is Hardline. that song Hot Sherry.
Hot Sherry.
Because it was a Streetheart.
That was Streetheart.
Yeah.
Who also originally did the song Dancing with Danger that Ace covered
did.
on Second
That's right.
Sighting.
Yes, that's right.
Now, there's a couple names stuck onto it, but I've heard the Streetheart original, and I don't hear the difference.
Like, I didn't realize that We've Got Your Rock is a cover off of the first Fraley's Comet album. There's an original artist that did that song.
I don't think I knew that either.
Yeah, I came across it on YouTube one day, and I was like, wow. So I listened to it, and then Todd Howarth told me that Calling to You or On to You.
I know the story about Calling to You.
Was his band, right? They changed the words.
Yeah, 707.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was originally called Megaforce.
That's right, yeah. Ironically, they were on Megaforce.
Yeah. We Got Your Rock. Words and music by Ace Frehley and Marty Coopersmuth.
Yeah, and that's the guy from, and I can't remember who sang it. I have heard it. So I think Ace must have changed around some words or something, but it's the song.
Probably just enough to get it changed around. But yeah, I remember this would have been about 30 years ago when I used, like, some friends of mine, we used to have a little band and I played drums, and our guitar player rented from these people, and his landlord had some older records, and he was looking through them or whatever, and he said, he asked me one time when we were at practice, he said, have you ever heard of a band called 707? I said, vaguely, like the early 80s. Yeah. He's like, I think you'd like it. It's like melodic rock. He was more into heavier stuff, but I said, I think you'd like this. And so I went over and listened to it. And so I'm looking at the back cover, and there's two things that stood out to me. One was Todd Howarth.
Yeah.
The other was Kevin Chalfant.
Right.
Who was in the Storm.
Yes.
Who sounds a lot like Steve Perry.
That's right.
And I really liked that first Storm album.
It was a good album.
But I'm looking at it. I'm like Megaforce. So there was a movie called Megaforce. So it's the title song from this movie.
Oh, that's cool.
So I listened to the song and I go, well, wait a second. That's Calling to You
by Ace Frehley.
And then it all made sense. I'm like, it's the same singer. He just rewrote it a little bit, gave it a different title. But I'm like, it's cool learning. Like, before the internet, it was really cool learning stuff like that because it's just by chance.
No, I know, and it's. I'm always intrigued by different versions of songs. That always intrigues me, or like finding this kind of stuff where you're like, oh, I'm the guy. I want to hear it. I want to hear what this evolved into. It's like Brittany Fox and Dead Daisies did a song called Midnight Moses, which was originally done by the sensational Alex Harvey band. And I've listened to the original, and I'm like, wow, that's cool. And King of the Nighttime World was done by somebody
Kim
else.
Fowley.
Yeah, and it's done by another band, and it's not as good.
That one, and there's an Alice Cooper song. Is it Escape from Welcome to My Nightmare? It's similar in time period, mid-70s.
Okay.
But yeah, there's another song. I think it's Escape from Welcome to My Nightmare
speaking of Kim Fowley, my understanding why Motley Crue left Stick to Your Guns off of the Elektra pressing was because Elektra didn't want to deal with Kim Fowley, because he wrote that song with them, with Nikki Sixx.
Right. Well, that makes sense, but I have never understood why they left Toast to the Town off, because to me, that could have been a hit.
Oh, it was a great song. I mean, Pretty Boy Floyd did a good version of it, actually.
You know what? The funny thing is, and I've had this conversation with a buddy of mine who was, I don't know if he still likes him, I haven't talked to him about it, but he was like the biggest Crue head I know. And he bought that Pretty Boy Floyd album just because they did Toast to the Town, because he wanted to hear a version of it.
I was the same.
I remember thinking, if the internet had been around, if the word got around that, hey, it's pretty close. In fact, it might even be a little better. So this is probably as close for now, for that time period, 89, 90. They could have had a gold record just on that, just on enough Motley Crue fans curious to hear that song if it had been publicized right.
I know, exactly. And I did the same thing. That's why I bought the album. And then years later, I think their last album, they did another Motley song that was never released, which was called Run for Your Life.
Oh yeah, I've heard. Yeah, I've heard that. Yeah, I used to have somebody gave me a CD once, and it was all, I think, from around the Shout at the Devil era. All these unreleased songs, and most of them were pretty decent.
Yeah, and there's one, Running Wild in the Night, I believe.
Running Wild in the Night, yeah.
Which has the lyrics to Save Your Souls in it.
Yeah, yeah. And that was a much better song than Save Your Souls.
Oh, no kidding. I don't know what they were thinking on that one.
That's an awful song.
It's a bad song.
It is fun. It is fun to track down. And that's one thing. I did that for my Sammy Hagar book. It's one thing. I learned a lot about people that not only recorded his songs, but whose songs he recorded. And going to listen to those original versions. But one of the biggest surprises was finding a French language version of a Hagar song that's heavier than his version.
Really?
Because he's got a song on his second album called Red.
Yeah, I know that song. That's a cool song.
Yeah. So there's he's passed away now, but there's a French rock and roll guy named Johnny Hallyday. Like, he was a superstar in France. Yeah. I mean, he was so big in the 60s, the Beatles were opening for him.
Wow.
Real quick side note, he had a young English guitar player in his band named Mick Jones, as in Mick Jones from Foreigner.
Yeah.
And he befriended, the Beatles befriended him because he was like the only other English-speaking guy that they'd met at that point when they were in France.
Wow.
Anyway, in 1980, as I learned when I was looking up stuff for the Hagar book, he did a version of the song Red, but someone rewrote lyrics for him, and it was called Guerre, which is French for war. Okay. And it's really, really good.
Cool.
And it's heavy.
Wow.
Because the thing about those early Hagar albums is that even when he had songs that were kind of like heavier, they weren't recorded very heavy.
Yeah.
You don't really get the full, but this is like really raw sounding. And I was like, wow, that's really, really cool. I would, I'd love to be able to take the Hagar vocal and put it over top of that music track.
Yeah, that was some of the problem with that Capital Hagar stuff I found, was that
it was all recorded. I think it was all recorded for AM radio. That's my thought.
Yeah, and it was never my cup of tea. I just didn't.
There'd be like 2 rock songs per album or so, but then he'd be covering Van Morrison, or he'd be covering Donovan, or he'd be covering Patti Smith. Like, it just didn't. There was no consistency until he signed with Geffen, and then they kind of let him do what he wanted to do. And the odd thing is that the same year he signed with Geffen, Rick Springfield had a top 10 single with I've Done Everything for You, which Sammy wrote for Capitol back in 78, and they didn't, they put it out as a single, but they put it out as a single by itself. They didn't wait for another album to come out. And so
it almost seems like Capitol didn't know what to do with him.
They had no idea what to do with, and it's, many times I've thought about this. Well, if he came from Montrose, who were, that first album anyway was such a heavy album and such a forward-thinking album for 73. It's a shame that he couldn't, what would happen if he had signed with Warner Brothers as a solo artist?
Yeah, no kidding.
But I understand, because people talk about that album now as being groundbreaking and influential, and it is a platinum album, but it took 13 years. So it wasn't a success out of the gate. So that's probably why he wasn't able to parlay that into a solo deal.
I know. And yeah, exactly. And you think of a song like Rock Candy that is so, he still plays it to this day.
Yeah.
That is just has that infectious drum beat and, that beginning and that cool guitar riff. And it's hard to believe that it didn't catch on at that time.
Well, Ted Templeman's autobiography that my buddy Greg Renoff kind of helped him with is really good. And basically Ted says, there wasn't a single. Now, there are great songs on that album, but he's right. For 1973, there really wasn't anything that was
It was a rock album, right?
It was a heavy rock album. Unless you were already established, like a Black Sabbath. But yeah, the Rock Candy is probably the closest thing, but the way that starts out with those thundering drums, like this, that wasn't going to get on top 40 airwaves if you look at the charts.
Yeah, back
in 73, which is a shame because it is a great album. Thankfully, it is one of those late success,
it's a late bloomer, right?
Albums that it eventually got its due. And I think the lesson there is that Warner Brothers never let it out of print.
Yeah,
so
which
it
was
always
good.
there for people to discover.
Yeah. Yeah, because it is one of those hidden gems.
Yeah, it really is. It's. I discovered it by accident. Yeah,
If you're a hard rock fan, it's a must-have.
Yeah, you know what? And to be honest with you, and I've dealt with a lot of these people over the years. Even if you hate Sammy and Van Halen and you're just not a fan,
I am a huge Sammy fan.
Yeah, most people will give it up for that first Montrose album and go, yeah, okay, well that was good. Even David Lee Roth in Van Halen's earliest club days, you can go on YouTube and find really rough versions of them doing, I think it's either Rock Candy or Make It Last.
Really?
So they were covering songs from the first Montrose album, and I love that because Dave famously made a statement, I will never sing a Sammy Hagar song. Well, you already did.
That's hilarious. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I don't think I knew that. That's amazing.
Unfortunately, there are some of those live versions that are really poorly recorded and like generation of tape loss, but you can tell what song they're doing. It's like they did so many different cover songs in their earliest years.
I know they did. Yeah.
I remember when Ronnie James Dio died, all of a sudden, all over YouTube, everybody was posting them doing Man on the Silver Mountain.
Oh, that's
which
cool.
I would never. That's not one
Dave
I would have guessed they would have done.
Dave singing it.
Wow.
I
don't remember exactly how. And I remember it was fast. But then again, if you listen to that Rainbow Live album, they always did that song too fast. But
yeah, which is I mean, a lot of times you hear live stuff from bands, and
especially in the 80s,
and it's too fast in the 80s.
Way too fast. Yeah.
Oh yeah, it totally ruins the momentum of the song.
If you change, I think if you change the tempo of a song too much, it's not the same song anymore.
Yeah, you're right. Exactly. I agree with you 100%.
One of the worst examples, and I love this lineup, and I'm glad it came. I'm glad they put it out, but I guess this would have been 2014. Whitesnake. There's a what did they call it? I think they call it
the purple
for Back to the Bone. No, it's all stuff from the Slide It In era. It's not
okay, Back to the Bone, right?
But yeah, it's live stuff with the John Sykes lineup. And they would do Walking in the Shadow of the Blues.
Yep.
Which is supposed to go like dun 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 dun, dun, and it's like dun 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 dun, like it's way too fast.
Sounds like a big gallop.
Way too fast. It sounds like a Maiden song now. Yeah. It's just not the same anymore. But
it's funny that you mentioned that too. I do have that. I have that on CD. That Back to the Bone album.
Not all of the songs, like the versions. It's really interesting because they did "Crying in the Rain," and I can hear
how he changed.
They were morphing it from the '82 version to what became the '87 version.
And I love that. I love that version. Too. I love that how you can hear Sykes is starting to put his flavor into it. Right.
He was so good. I don't think he was destined to be in a band for too long with anybody. Never mind Coverdale.
Yeah.
I just don't think it was. But the short moments of brilliance. I mean, I love Thin Lizzy's Thunder and Lightning album.
That's a fantastic album.
Yeah, like that's an album that I've said to people, look, you don't necessarily have to be a fan of Thin Lizzy. If you just like early 80s metal.
Yeah.
This is put this album on.
I mean, you can tell like on Cold Sweat that, Sykes had a big part in that one.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Because
it's
so
funny
him.
because I didn't get into Thin Lizzy for years later. Now I'm a pretty big fan of theirs, but I love from the beginning when I saw the first video to this date. I still am a huge fan of the first Blue Murder album.
Oh, me too. Absolutely.
But that first song, Riot, you listen to the way that he sings that, it's essentially Jailbreak.
Yeah, that's a good point. I'm gonna have to put it on again.
It's essentially, there's a riot down on Main Street tonight. Tonight there's going to be a jailbreak somewhere in the town. It's very similar. And that live album, I actually like that live album that they put out as Thin Lizzy with Sykes doing all the vocals,
that was amazing.
He could do a fair.
He did a good job. Yeah,
of Phil. So I think it fit, but yeah, they on that album they do Cold Sweat, and they do, what's the other one? The slower one, The Sun Goes Down.
Sun Goes Down, yeah. Yeah, that's the only album he did with Thin Lizzy, right? Only studio album.
That's the only studio album, yeah.
And then David stole him to go to Whitesnake, right?
Yeah. And then what did he do? They created a classic, right? Oh, now, legendary. It's funny, somebody that doesn't get enough credit for making Whitesnake more accessible is Mel Galley.
You're right. He's kind of the in-between guy, right? Almost.
My favorite Whitesnake song ever is Love Ain't No Stranger.
Oh, that's a great
John
one.
Sykes doesn't have anything to do with that.
No, I know he doesn't. That's Mel Galley.
So Mel Galley wrote in that more commercial style. That's him, like Guilty of Love and Give Me More Time. And, so he doesn't get enough credit because, there's that ambiguity of who is actually in the band. He's not in any of those videos.
No, I know. And it's so bizarre, right? And you can tell most of it's not John Sykes.
Yeah.
Because his style's not like you listen to Slide It In to the 87 album.
Yeah.
Maybe John, because there's two different versions, right? John probably emulated what was already on there. Nobody's ever really going to know the whole truth of what's what, right?
No, I know I've had that discussion with a lot of people, but I think it's only natural to get used to the version that you grew up with, and which in my case would be the American version. That's the one that came out in Canada, was the American version. And not only am I used to hearing that mix, I'm also used to hearing the songs in that order. To me, it's weird for Slide It In to start off with Gambler.
Oh yeah, I don't like it.
It's like.
Well, did you see Slip of the Tongue? They changed the whole track order, and I hate it. I don't like it. And that's a disappointing album after the 87.
Well, I guess I'm one of the only people in the world that will defend Slip of the Tongue.
I do like it. Don't get me wrong.
The reason is that, of course, I got into Whitesnake with the 87 album, like most people.
I'm the same.
Like most of the world. And then I went back and tried to find as many of the older albums as I could.
Same did.
The one that gave me the hardest, and I think we talked about this, was Ready and Willing, because Geffen didn't reissue it, but I eventually found a copy of it. Yeah. So by the time Slip of the Tongue came out, I had all the Whitesnake albums. Yeah. I was ready for a new album. So that's the first one to come out. And I understand the criticisms of it. I really do. But I still really like that album.
There are some great songs. Great written songs. The Deeper the Love, I love that song.
I think the biggest problem that the album had is that it didn't have a slam dunk single. And I think that, it's the whole thing about, Adrian Vandenberg versus Steve Vai, because I'm an enormous fan of the band Vandenberg.
I am too.
Huge fan. If they had done Burning Heart, I think that was the single that album needed. I think that could have been the big hit.
And I think you're right. It is on the box set. There is a short version.
There's a version of it. Yeah, David sings like the first verse, and the rest of it's instrumental.
It sounds like he's straining a little bit. Did you ever notice that?
It's not until I started to listen to his version that I thought, well, maybe they should have put it in a different key for him. Because Bert Hearing, the first singer for Vandenberg, he was fantastic. He had a great soulful voice. It was his English wasn't the best, so every once in a while he'd sing something and you couldn't quite catch what he said. But I loved the sound of his voice. He had almost like, I don't know, like the Dutch Joe Lynn Turner or something. He had a lot of soul.
Yeah, he was great.
They could have tuned it down a step or two. If the original's in A, they could have done this in G. Yeah. But I think that there was a great song there, and I would have loved to have heard Coverdale just do his thing with it. And at that time period, the grunge hadn't taken over.
No, it was huge. It was still
Skid Row was huge. Yep. Aerosmith was huge. Motley Crue was huge. That could have been a huge hit, like Is This Love or Here I Go Again. Not saying make it the first single, but I like The Deeper the Love a lot, but it wasn't the song.
Now You're Gone wasn't as good either.
No, that one's crazy. It's crazy how fast they faded out of sight in the States.
Yeah.
The Deeper the Love was so first of all, I like the 89 version of Fool for Your Loving. I like the original version more.
I do too.
But I don't mind the remake, but that was way too heavy to put out as the first
almost
single.
feel
way too heavy.
That's true. I almost feel like they should have, like, if you watch In the Still of the Night, the video with Doug Aldridge and Reb Beats with that lineup, the version they do of Don't Break My Heart Again and Ready and Willing, I almost feel like they should have done one of those songs.
Don't Break My Heart Again could have been a hit too if they'd have given it that. Yeah.
I think Fool for Your Lovin' is hurt because of Steve Vai playing on it. I think you lost.
Yeah, and I love Steve Vai, but he can only play the way Steve plays.
That's right, and you can't.
I think, and I've had the privilege in the last couple of years of seeing Steve, and earlier this year I saw Adrian, and it was fantastic. But Adrian's much more melodically minded, and he's a songwriter. He writes melodically.
Where did you see Adrian?
That's just the way he thinks. In Portland, Maine. It was him and his band doing. It was mostly Whitesnake songs, Whitesnake songs. But it was Matt Slevin, the guy that he's had singing for him for the last few years.
Because I have that last album. Album.
So it sounds a lot like Coverdale, right? Yeah, there's a concert review episode on my channel, but they opened with Hit the Ground Running from that last album, which was great.
Yeah.
And they did Your Love Is in Vain, and of course they did Burning Heart. The rest was Whitesnake, but they advertised, it was advertised that way. It was Adrian Vandenberg plays the music of Whitesnake, and it was fantastic. Adrian had played on Slip of the Tongue. It probably would have been a little bit more successful because it would have been, and I like Steve Vai a lot, but I like Steve Vai doing Steve Vai material.
I'm the same.
What I mean?
I'm the same. I think Steve Vai's brilliant, but he lacked that blues element that that was kind of lost on that album.
He was like, I think Coverdale was like, he's the guitar player's guitar player. Let him do what he wants. But it's like, you still got to appeal to a mainstream pop audience.
Exactly.
And that's another thing that I think hurt the Blue Murder album is it didn't have Can't Miss Pop Rock single. I think Jelly Roll was not it.
I know Jelly Roll could have been it. I think there's elements of that song. If it had been structured different, maybe. You know what I mean?
Jelly Roll is too, it can't decide what it wants to be.
I know.
It starts out as this kind of jug band blues shuffle, and then it ends up being a power ballad. It's very strange. If they were going to put a ballad out from that album, they would have been better off with the song Out of Love, which is more Whitesnake sounding.
Which was cool.
It certainly wasn't because it certainly... they didn't have a front man. It doesn't matter. John Sykes was a great singer. I mean,
he was a great singer.
Where did that voice come from? He was a perfectly good rock vocalist, but it didn't have a Here I Go Again. It didn't have that song that just people could not resist.
Exactly. But do you think what hurt it was the fact that they were going with that whole pirate type of theme? Like, yeah,
I know it's kind of, you look at the pictures and you're like, well, all right. I don't think that hurt it so much as that they were also on Geffen. So they were still competing with Whitesnake. And Coverdale had a lot of power. He had
that was probably the Steve Stevens thing, right?
Yeah.
The Chrysalis with Steve.
I think that John Sykes, I think that they would have been far better off moving to another label.
But were they allowed was the question, right? The leaving member clause.
Right? I mean, Geffen probably offered him Geffen probably offered him a ton of money to do that, to do that album. But it's like, and it happens. Think about in 91 when Foreigner puts out that Unusual Heat album. They've got Johnny Edwards on vocals, and Lou Gramm puts out the Shadow King album. The Shadow King album was buried because Atlantic's like, we don't care. We want Lou Gramm in Foreigner.
Yeah.
So we're not,
both good albums.
Which is stupid because, I mean, you could stand to make more money, right? Yeah. And thank goodness Warner Brothers didn't do that.
Yeah.
With Van Halen. They looked at David Lee Roth. They looked at Van Halen with Sammy Hagar. Like, we stand to sell a lot of albums with these two entities. Same thing, but most record labels don't. They want the cash cow. They want the guaranteed. They want this singer with that guitar player or that writer or whatever. I mean, it's the same thing. I've read that when Joe Perry left Aerosmith, especially those first two Joe Perry Project albums, I really like both of those albums. Those are good.
They're good.
They got buried.
Yeah.
They got buried.
Absolutely.
And it was an effort on the label. The promo was pulled, all of that. And it's funny because I didn't even know those albums existed until 1990.
Oh, wow. I can't remember. I think I got them
totally
around
not on my
time.
radar at all.
I think I got them around and found them in a CD shop, like a used CD shop or something like that. And I ended up getting all three of them.
Yeah.
No, they're good albums.
With the Blue Murder one, if Blue Murder had switched, even if Blue Murder had moved over to, say, Warner Brothers or something, where there were still some ties there, but John Colodner could have done his A&R work. Because he would do A&R work for other labels because he worked with Bon Jovi and they weren't signed to his label and all of that. So I think that there was a missed opportunity there. But mostly, you're still thinking, and people talk about as great John Sykes and Whitesnake. John Sykes and Whitesnake. The sad reality, you have to look at it. I always say that big wide world out there that don't know a thing about who's who in a band. Yeah. They either like a song or they don't. And most of the people that bought that Whitesnake album, that's the only Whitesnake album they bought because it had Here I Go Again and or Is This Love?
Yeah, most guys aren't like us, right?
Right. Well, yeah, most people. I mean, if that was a pop album, that was so big, right?
Yeah.
It sold. That's an album that one of these days would not surprise me if we find out it's certified as diamond.
Oh, absolutely.
Because I think the last time it got certified, it was at 8 million in the States. Slip of the Tongue just got to 1 million. That's a huge drop off. Even Slap.
That's a huge drop.
It in sold more than that.
Yeah, that's a huge drop off.
So that just shows you what a hit. The difference with a hit single, and then that Blue Murder album didn't even certify gold. As good as it was, as beautifully produced as it was, it's got that huge Bob Rock production on it, and
that guitar tone.
It's just it didn't have the pop single. Like not everybody's going to go searching for it. Like I was actively waiting for this album to come out. Same thing with Mr. Big. I knew it was coming out. I was waiting for it. Most people didn't.
I was the same with Badlands.
If they heard a song and they liked it, they might have bought it.
Like I thought Badlands, that album.
That's weird. That's a band that never clicked with me for some reason. I know most people swear by those albums. It went over my head.
See,
for whatever reason
at the time when Badlands came out,
everything.
I liked Badlands better than Blue Murder. Now, I prefer the Blue Murder album way over the Badlands album because they were kind of like the same time and the same type of thing, right?
There were an awful lot of B bands. You remember that? There were an awful lot of B bands that came out.
There's a ton of B bands. It's
Bang
crazy.
Tango,
Tango, Babylon AD, Bullet Boys. Who else?
Yeah.
Oh, there's
Baton
a ton
Rouge.
of Brittany Fox, right? Awful lot of
I
Bs.
mean, you could say Mr. Big.
Yeah. Yeah, the B.
Bonham.
Oh yeah, Bonham. Yeah.
But so many people over the years have said to me, I said, I can't, you must like Badlands. And I'm like, I'm sorry, I don't. I never got it. There's nothing wrong with it. It just didn't click with me.
I like the single the most. I like Dreams in the Dark.
Sometimes things do over the years. But I'll tell you, one of those B bands that I really liked, and I still really think this band was just in the middle of too many other bands getting signed, was Baton Rouge.
Yes.
I thought that band, especially that first album, Shake Your Soul, was excellent. I thought
it's a great album.
That had potential hits almost all over that album, but there were just too many bands.
There was.
By the time that came out.
The second album, Lights Out Around the Playground.
Lights Out in the
Playground.
Yeah.
They did a Babylon AD song on that album. Desperate was on the first Babylon.
But
AD.
if you look at the songwriting credits, there's some cross Jack Ponte. There you go. The Jack Ponte's another. He's like, and he passed away a few years ago, but he's like another one of those Jim Vallance type of guys that just had an ear for catchy songs. He co-wrote, what song is it? I think it's the song Shot Through the Heart on the first Bon Jovi album.
Yes, he did. And I believe...
Not You Give Love a Bad Name,
no.
Shot Through the Heart.
Well, I mean, You Give Love a Bad Name's an interesting one because a Bonnie Tyler song has the same chorus.
It's that's
not chorus,
that's
same
a Desmond
music.
Child. Yeah, same phrasing, same. Yeah, and that's a Desmond Child thing. But Shot Through the Heart, there's another version of that song too.
I've heard that too. Yeah.
Yeah, because it's a band
Jack
called
Ponte.
Surgeon.
Yeah, and that was
Terrible
Jack
name for a band,
Ponte's
but
band.
they had an album out in '85.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. And Jack
it was EMI or Capitol they were on, so they do a version of that. I don't think it's as good. And another song on that first Bon Jovi album that there's a few versions of is "She Don't Know Me."
Oh, I didn't know that. Huh.
Because that song was written by a guy named Mark Avsek. You know who I mean by Donnie Iris?
Yeah.
Aaliyah. Great song. Love is like a rock.
Yep.
Mark Avsek was his right-hand man, songwriter.
Okay, cool.
So, which kind of makes sense if you listen to "She Don't Know Me."
Yeah.
Boy, Donnie Iris, there's a guy right there that needed an image makeover. He could have been huge. He had great songs, and he had a great voice.
Yeah.
But he looked like he belonged in Devo.
I know. I've seen. I saw him in Cleveland.
But he totally made mainstream rock, like Billy Squier, and he was right in there.
Cool stuff. Yeah.
Super powerful voice. But yeah, we could go on and on and on.
I know we could.
Obviously we miss Ace, and it's one of those things where these guys, none of them are immortal, but it's just it's
bizarre.
It's that reality of wow, but it's crazy when you think about the fact that I know Mark St. John was kind of a blip on the radar, but he died way young. But how it's almost been we're almost as we're filming, we're almost up on the anniversary of Eric Carr's death, and it's crazy how young he was, 41 years old. And how long he's been gone. 91.
I know.
Same day as Freddie Mercury.
I know, and it's crazy. And you think,
which necessarily meant that it didn't get the publicity, right?
That's right. And I just remember thinking, okay, Eric Carr's 41. I was like, oh, that's because I was so young, because we were so young when Eric Carr died, when he passed away, right? Thinking, but now when you think of it at our age now, it's like, oh man, that's so young. Right? So much,
yeah. The one that really got me when I was a kid was Steve Clark.
Well, I did too, as well. That was surreal. I was a
huge Def Leppard fan, me and too. That was like I couldn't. It was like you expect somebody that's been around forever to die. You don't expect someone that's.
So
I don't
young.
even know if he was 30. If he wasn't,
I think he was.
If he was 31, it was only just right. He was a young man. Yeah,
and they lost something after that.
I can't believe this. Like one of those guys.
Such a talent.
Yeah, there's a certain raw. Yeah, he had such a knack for coming up with weird guitar parts that were perfect.
Yeah, just this, and everything after that, as good as it has been, there's never been those guitar parts like he wrote in Def Leppard. Just these little nuances and differences, and that made them so special, in their music. Adrenalize was good. And then, the stuff this fall has been good, but it's never been.
I know what you mean. Yeah. And I think they realized that he was one of a kind, and there was a certain rawness that he brought too.
Yeah.
That as perfect as those recordings were, he brought a little bit of, I don't know, there was just something very, very special. But I just remember, that was the first time. It was like looking around, I was like, there's a guy on the poster on my wall is dead.
I know.
You know what I mean? It was just weird, surreal.
Yeah, it was
That's
surreal.
The first one that really hit me.
Yeah, I think as well. It was, I remember hearing of it, and for days you're like just not believing this. And how is,
Well, I remember going to school the next day, and I thought everybody would be talking about it. It was like me and my buddy that I always talked to were the only ones that were talking about it.
That's crazy, right? Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, because it was 91, they hadn't had an album out for such a long time.
I
right?
know, but
it doesn't matter how big you are. You can be forgotten.
That's right. That easily, right? Oh wow. Okay, man. Well, yeah, we'll leave on that note. And I think Steve Clark's a good one to leave on, but I appreciate it. And we should do this every so often again, because it seems like we've got some amazing content to talk about that I normally don't get to talk about on my show either.
No, this was great. I enjoyed this, but I don't know how you're going to edit this, but I wish you all the luck.
Thanks, Tim.
Yeah. No, look, I think people will enjoy watching this just to know, well, who are they going to talk about next? But this is great. This is the essence of why we do all this, because we're into it. We love it.
Yeah.
And it's good to find someone that you can talk about without having to explain, oh, it's the band that does this song, that you think you recognize. No, you're right there. You know exactly what I'm talking about. So that's...
Yeah, which I love too. It's nice to talk to somebody on that, I guess, on the same level, more or less, where, we have the same interest and we know, we've been around for a long time and we were always interested in this stuff.
A lot of the same points of reference. So that makes it easy too.
Exactly.
But, yeah.
Okay, man. Well, I'll be in touch.
Thanks for having me on again. And
no problem, buddy. I'll talk to you soon.
Right.
Okay. Cheers.
See ya.
See ya.
Bye. Cool.